to give me a series of messages telling me it wasn't working, but the live button was still lit, so fun. Where's my thing? Oh, it looks like I might have stopped again. Nope, I think I'm good. Sorry about that, YouTube stuff. Toddlers, building blocks, and team consciousness. Little weird mix, but it's nice to start with simple models and then make them a little more complicated to include other things. So a really simple way of looking at people playing Rocket League would be to break them into two categories: builders and exploiters. You know, imagine the players are little toddlers, maybe a little bit older. And you put them in a room with put three of them in a room with a bunch of blocks and see what they do. Do they each build their own towers? Do they build one together? Let's say they are going to build one big tower together. What's the right way to build it? You know, I don't know if you've ever watched kids play like this. You know, somebody will start doing something. No, you have to do it this way. No, it's this way. And before sooner or later, one of them gets ticked off and the blocks get knocked down, which is oddly analogous to Rocket League. Okay. When three players, you're playing 3v3, when everybody's following, I guess you could call it a similar blueprint, in a cooperative effort, they form something like a collective consciousness. Playing the game, things can be really random. And if you can significantly increase the accuracy with which you can predict what your teammates are going to do, it not only increases your ability to predict outcomes, it reduces, I guess you could call it your cognitive processing load. And the more that you and your team are on the same page, the more it reduces that load. And that'll increase your situational awareness and accuracy. I guess you could say it's something like a peer-to-peer network, like forms between you and your teammates. That thing where you know what they're doing. You couldn't possibly explain how you know what they're doing or how you knew where to be where you were at, because it's this is processed subconsciously. But there's like regular communication with a little more bandwidth than I think people realize. And it's more than just not having to spend cognitive resources on multiple possible outcomes, because you don't know what this rando is going to do, so you got to be like, okay, if he does this, and then I got to do this, and he's going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and you kind of have to. You don't really feel it so much, but that's a much bigger load than playing with someone where it's like when a certain clear action is what would be taken by you and pretty much anybody you choose to play with. Like when you are certain that they're going to do that, you don't have to spend all those other mental resources. But yeah, the communication goes back and forth, and you can feel it, but it's like a really hard thing to describe. But it's kind of like when you can tell someone's driving angry, but if somebody asked you how to describe, they're driving angry, it would get a little fuzzy. Funny thing is, I usually just do an outline, but a new method of procrastination emerged where I stopped doing an outline and started writing a script. So I got a little more here than usual. You could look at Rocket League. We'll extend the building block and toddlers analogy out a little bit to where you can have there's two different strategies you can follow. You can all three of you try to build one collective tower, or you could use what a lot of people seem to use, which is the independent tower strategy, to where you just queuing up random is such a pain in the neck, and making yourself vulnerable for exploitation by parasite players. Just some people just get cynical, so they're just going to try to play the best game they can, and they're not really going to invest a whole lot into seeing if their teammates are cooperative. And if you stay in this state long enough, you're just a cynical player, and you eventually, I imagine, lose the ability to play cooperatively entirely. And I should be clear, a lot of this, if you were, and you've probably had, everybody's probably had friends who you play with them and you're like, oh my God, they play like a jackass. How do I tell them that well, in my case, I'll just spill it and let the pieces fall where they may. that has its upsides and downsides. um, in my opinion, there's a toxic divide here, because just not being willing to invest in like a cooperative team strategy doesn't necessarily make you toxic. It can make you kind of jaded, maybe a little cynical, but there's a toxic divide, I think, where there's these players that'll exploit their teammates by making use of the information being shared by their teammates. But, they'll make use of the information that, their predictable teammates are playing cooperatively, so that gives this cynical player a boost. But then he'll move in such a way to actually exploit them by feeding bad information. So they're helping him, he's undermining them, but it happens at this subtle layer, and usually you don't really even know what's happening. You're just like, what is going on? Like, why is everything going to shit all of a sudden? And it's because somebody just basically flipped, and now they're like going to be a parasite, or maybe they just turned it up, or it gets really dicey. But it's basically about, boosting their own individual performance, and these same people usually cite score later on when their toxicity matures. The thing that really sucks is if two people are working from slightly different blueprints, of how to play, but they've just been in matches with like assholes, it's too often that they will identify each other as like, knockers down of blocks rather than builders. And if those two people hadn't run into toxic players initially, they might have found a way to work together. So I guess I had another thing I was going to talk about. I can get into a game here. And I would like... Okay, this is a thing that's never going to happen. I'm just going to be honest. Not going to happen. But this would definitely reduce toxicity in Rocket League. No doubt. And I would call it incognito mode. So you open up in Rocket League a new mode. And when you go into that mode, it assigns you a random name. Fluffy Bunny or Unicorn, Unicorn Love, or maybe not that, but something really foo-foo and bright and happy, sunshine, rainbows, unicorns, because this is going to be and then I'll explain all this while I'm doing this later, but you set up the chat filters like really hard, like any ethnic group, any protected status, anything like that, and you don't just block those words. If somebody like uses an ethnicity, it gets identified as an ethnicity, and then it will randomly choose a fantasy ethnicity to replace it with. So it makes it super hard if you're going to try to do like, basically it's a place that the trolls can go and just be assholes to each other. And, sometimes normal people too just want to get in there and be a jackass. And to have an actual place where you could go and like, they don't record any of the chat, they don't moderate anything in there, you can't report anybody while you're in there. And this could also be a place where people could go play while they are banned. But since it'd be really hard to say anything like really hardcore without it sounding like how much you love rainbows, but people could go in there and play just as toxic as they want. And, they'd have fun working around, the system. Like there's got to be a way to, I think I still have it on. Yeah, I've been turning off cross-network play. But I think that just having that place to go and having it, as strange as it sounds, Rocket League needs a safe space for toxicity. Or somebody, because sometimes people just want to do that. And every person that's in there getting their fill of conflict isn't out in casual or ranked ruining people's games. I come in. Oh, you can't. I got to do something about how you can't see the chat because I'm on 3 screens here. And I meant to do something where you can see the chat. But as soon as I come in, somebody's like, screw these guys. I didn't quite get as much of that as I'd hoped. Yeah, I think the new players have been what would you call it, matriculating their way up. So like I don't feel like I've been playing that much worse, but my MMR has been going down, which that could be happening for a number of reasons, and I don't really care about it other than like the novelty of what that might imply is happening. But I think it's just because people who came into the game when it was free to play, they're starting to surpass me. And being that that's not like a self-benefiting assumption, there's a good chance that it's right. Oh, that was unfortunate. But yeah, it's like that's why the feeling of like when you just like you get so frustrated in a game, it is literally like somebody's coming in and knocking down your blocks. Okay, I thought he was coming up. I guess not. I'm also not playing that well right now. Oop, that was not as good as I'd hoped. And the thing is that when you're feeling that way, like, it could be external, but it could also be internal, because being unhappy with yourself because you're performing badly feels very similar to somebody basically parasitizing you. They feel very similar. So the answer to both situations is the same. You should probably not keep playing if that's the experience you're having. And and I hate to say it, but if you're a person that just keeps playing when they're all frustrated like that, well, that's probably the reason. That's probably the reason you're there. It's kind of like, I've probably mentioned this a couple of times, but like when, everybody knows somebody who seems to be at the center of a lot of drama. And usually those people actually will, farm for sympathy over like, oh, I don't know, why is everything so dramatic? Why can't things just be more calm? And why do people have to be upset all the time? And it's like, if you know that person, they're out there like seeding conflict all over the place because that's their thing. But they won't like own that that's what they want. So if somebody's basically constantly getting into conflicts with people in Rocket League, but they just keep playing, but they say, hey, it's not my fault, it's them. Well, at some point, that's what you're there for.